Good morning. When I started going out with Hazel, her dad had a dog called Ricky. Well, in actual fact, to tell you the truth, he has had 5 or 6 dogs called Ricky over the years. But I remember this one in particular because he always strained at the leash. And on one occasion, we took him out for a walk, and I remember Hazel holding onto the lead as firmly as she could, and Ricky ran right round behind her and between her legs, and up she went in the air and landed on her driveway. In his early life, Moses, I think, strained at the leash quite a bit. On Saturday, we were looking at how he had strained at the leash whenever he saw one of his fellow Israelites being treated harshly by an Egyptian. And in an instant, he didn't look to God, but he thought only of the situation, and he killed the Egyptian. And then the next day, he had come back to the scene of the crime, as it were. And he saw 2 Israelites fighting, and he intervened in the fight. And one of them said, "Are you going to do to me as you did to the Egyptian yesterday?" Instantly, Moses realized that he had been found out. And out of fear of this, he decided that he would run away to the desert of Midian. And I reckon that in those middle years that were about to begin, that Moses' life was very different. He settled into country life. In fact, Exodus 2 verse 21 tells us that he was content. He was content looking after the flocks of Jethro. He was content with Zipporah, his new wife. He was content with all that was going on around him. And for a time in Moses' life, in fact for about 40 years, Moses sees God as big and he sees man as small. Before, Moses seemed to think that he was something pretty special, but now he seems content being a nobody, perhaps a little bit too content. It was the fear of man that drove him into exile. But even when Pharaoh dies, Moses still doesn't seem to even consider returning to Egypt. It would appear that Moses has learned his lesson and he is a totally changed man now. But is he really? Exodus 3 verse 1 says, "Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed." Moses is now 80 years of age. And I think he reckoned that his opportunities for serving the Lord were gone. That particular boat had sailed and had left Moses standing at the dock. And now he comes face to face with God, speaking to him through a burning bush, and he has a decision to make about who is going to be big in his mind. Will God be big in his mind now, or man? How will he respond? And God says to him in verse 10, "Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." This is Moses' opportunity to prove useful to God once again. But all he does is tie himself up in knots. His first one is, "I'm not smart." Listen to verse 11. "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" In a sense, he is saying to God, "But Lord, I can't be your spokesman. Why? I wouldn't have any answers to their questions." Charles Swindoll says, when Moses gave God that first miserable excuse and said, "I won't have all the answers," God has an immediate reply. "Perhaps not, Moses, but you will have all of me." God is trying to encourage Moses to take his eyes off man and place them on him. "I'm not smart," says Moses. And the second knot that he has is, "I'm not sophisticated." Moses imagines himself going to the children of Israel after having spent 40 years out in this desert of Midian. And he's thinking in his mind, surely they're going to laugh at me. And I suppose he's feeling this sense of nakedness that we thought about on Saturday. He is sure that they're going to see through him. He feels as though he has no credibility with them whatsoever. And he reckons that the people are not going to want to listen to him. How often do we get ourselves caught up in knots as we think of how people are going to think of us? They're not going to want to listen to me. They're not going to reckon that I have anything worth listening to. I'm not sophisticated, he reckoned. And so God says to Moses, tell them I'm the one who's sending you. I am who I am. That's who's sending you. And God is encouraging Moses to lift his eyes off himself and to look to God. Moses had to learn the lesson that life was about God and not about himself and not even about others. He needed to stop worrying about what others thought and consider only who his God was, the God who was calling him to serve him in this way. And the third knot that Moses used was this one. I'm not a speaker. I'm not smart, I'm not sophisticated, and I'm not a speaker. Exodus 4 verse 10 says, "O my Lord, I am not eloquent." This is Moses' trump card, as it were. He says to God, listen to how I speak. I have a stoppage in my speech. I have an impediment in my speech. And I've known people over the years with such impediments. My own father would have had a stoppage in his speech in his early days. And so often whenever the people with a stoppage are in front of others, they feel that the stoppage instantly becomes worse. And maybe that's what was terrifying Moses. If I go to speak for God with Pharaoh, I'll get there and suddenly I won't have anything to say. And the thought of confronting Pharaoh, I imagine, would have brought Moses out in a sweat. But God says to him in Exodus 4 verse 11, "Who has made man's mouth? Have not I?" It's as if God is saying to Moses, look, for the last time, Moses, get your eyes off man and look to me. Shame, embarrassment, and inferiority marked much of Moses' life up to this point. But thankfully, that's not the end of the story. Once he learned to lift his eyes off man and to look at God, he became useful in God's hands. With eyes on God, he was able to confront Pharaoh. With eyes on God, he was able to lead the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. With his eyes on God, he was able to part the Red Sea and lead God's people through the wilderness. With his eyes on God, he was able to lead the children of Israel right up to the edge of the promised land. Maybe you're a Christian. And like Moses, you have filled your life with knots. I'm not able to witness. I'm not able to stand for you, Lord. Now is your time to take your eyes off man and to place them on God. To make man small in your mind and to make God great. Maybe you're not yet a Christian and you're more concerned about what others would say if they heard that you'd become a Christian. Maybe you're worried that they would think that you had gone soft. Maybe they would be frightened about how it would change your relationship with them, and that worries you. And at the minute, man is big in your mind and God is small. But you're frightened. You're frightened of what the future holds. Now is the time to make God big, to realize that what is most important It's how God sees you. And at the minute he sees you as a sinner who deserves his wrath and his judgment, make man small. Don't be worried about what man thinks. But come and trust in the God who has been so great that he sent his Son to die for your sins, that you could be saved by trusting in him.